Hi everyone, this actually feels rather old school because you are sitting on top of my washing basket, which is what I used to prop my phone on when I started filming videos all of 7 years ago. Hi, my name is Jen. I am an author. I have written 10 books for children and grown-ups, and my pet subject, the thing that I love the most, is the history of fairy tales. I find it a fascinating topic. So on this YouTube channel here, I talk about the books that I'm currently reading, have read. I also talk about the representation of disability and disfigurement in the books I'm reading and media in general. And I also have a series, which is this series called Fairy Tales with Jen, where I dissect a particular fairy tale and talk about how you can find it represented in various different languages around the world historically. It has been a while since the last episode, and today I thought it would be appropriate to put on a blonde wig because today I'm going to be talking about the history of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I've also put on my little Yorick necklace as well, though here's a polar bear, and the bears in this fairy tale aren't really polar bears, but it's the closest that I could find. This video is made possible due to the support that I receive over on Patreon, and if you enjoy my channel and would like to consider throwing $1 in the tip jar, I will leave that linked in the description box down below. The story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears is not as extensive historical wise as something like Beauty and the Beast or Little Red Riding Hood, but I still find it really fascinating, and there are a few little side tracks that we can trundle down, explore different parts of the forest that have tenuous links to Goldilocks, which I find really interesting. So, Goldilocks and the Three Bears was actually primarily called The Story of the Three Bears, and this was before the character of Goldilocks entered the equation, and it was thought to have been popularized by someone called Robert Southey or Southey, depending on who was pronouncing his name, and he was a romantic poet who was around in the 1800s. He said that he had heard the tale being told a lot orally, which is of course how fairy tales began. They were told via word of mouth. I've spoken about that in previous episodes too, and he decided that he would write this tale down. So in his version, the story of the Three Bears, there are three male bears that live in a house in the woods together. There isn't a baby bear, it's just a smaller male bear, a medium-sized bear, and a large bear. And they have made some porridge, which they have left on a table to cool, and they go out into the forest to have a walk so that they don't eat it and burn their mouths. And when they go outside, an old woman breaks into their house. This woman is described as ugly and dirty and someone who belongs in the house of correction. Previously, I've spoken about the way that fairy tales treat women, which is often very unkindly, and this is one of the stereotypes of women that you often find in fairy tales: an old woman who is up to no good, normally in the middle of a forest. So she breaks into their house and she tries their porridge. One bowl of porridge is too hot, one is too cold, and one is just right. She tries their chairs. One is too hard, one is too soft, and one is just right. And then she tries their beds, and one is too big, one is too small, and one is just right. So she goes to sleep in the bed of the bear whose bed is just right, and when she falls asleep, the bears come back home, and they're very upset to find that their porridge has been eaten and their furniture has been used, and one of their beds has a human woman in it. So they wake her up, and she jumps up in alarm, and then she jumps out of the window. And the fairy tale says at the end that the author isn't sure if she lives or if she dies or if she runs away, only to be arrested and thrown in prison. Most places will source this as the original written version of Goldilocks and the Three Bears or the story of the Three Bears, but this actually isn't true. So this was written down in 1837, which, if we can place it in the world of fairy tales at that time, that was about 15 years after the first English translation of some of the Grimm's fairy tales from German into English. But actually in 1831, a woman called Eleanor Mure had written a story called The Three Bears. And this again is a version of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, or just the story of the Three Bears, and not one that she invented herself, but one that had been told a lot, and she decided she would write it down and illustrate it. And this is definitely way above Robert Southey, sorry Robert, in my list of favourites of Goldilocks tales because it is so ridiculous and wonderful. So this is the story of the three bears, and in this story it's not about three bears who live in a forest, it's about three bears who really want to live in a house just like humans do. Kind of think of, you know, Animal Farm. It's a little bit like that. So they have a house in the centre of London. One day an old woman breaks into their house and starts eating their food and trying out their furniture, and the bears really don't like this. So the bears seize her. Here's an amazing picture of the bears seizing this old woman, and they throw her out of the house. And not satisfied with just throwing her out of the house, they think, well, I would like to punish her more than that. So they try to burn her, but that doesn't work. So they try to drown her, and that doesn't work either. So just to make sure she really, really can't come back and steal their stuff, they impale her on the steeple of St. Paul's Cathedral. The end. This pamphlet by Eleanor Mure was written for her nephew on his birthday. So as you can see, the older versions of the story of the three bears focus on an older woman who's breaking into a house and not a young girl. There is also an English folktale called Scrapefoot, which is about a vixen that creeps into the house of a bear family, and it's thought that maybe that may have been changed from vixen to woman, and that's why it is an older woman to begin with. This was then changed in 1850 and then became more popularized in nursery rhymes as a young girl, at first called Silverlocks or Silver Hair, and then later called Golden Hair or Goldilocks. And Goldilocks is the character that we mainly know today, a naughty girl who is going through the woods and breaks into the house of three bears, a mama bear, a papa bear, and a baby bear. She drinks their porridge, she goes in their chairs, she goes in their bed. She normally escapes unscathed too. So that transition of the woman in the tale being an old woman and then going into a younger woman who then becomes known as Goldilocks started around 1850, and that kind of ties in with Struwwelpeter, which was published in 1845, a German collection of moral tales, fairy tales, folk tales about children who were punished for doing things that they shouldn't be doing, shouldn't in inverted commas, such as a young boy who continued to suck his thumbs when he was told not to, so they ended up being cut off. You know, just normal everyday things like that. We can definitely note similarities between this, especially when it transitions into Goldilocks being a young girl. Goldilocks and Red Riding Hood, two young girls who go off into the woods and stray from the path that they should have been on, and in doing so encounter wild creatures who may be out to do them harm. We can also draw parallels between this and things like Hansel and Gretel. Again, children getting lost in the woods and finding mysterious houses with things inside that they could potentially eat that might get them into trouble. And also there are definitely similarities between Goldilocks and Rapunzel, with the focus being on their hair and how beautiful it is and how perfect and how valued that is, not just in fairy tales but in society as a whole too. And this is illustrated in The Little Mermaid, which I've spoken about in another video, which I will link in the description box down below, when the Little Mermaid's sisters cut off their hair in sacrifice as an ultimate price to pay. They lose their femininity, air quotes, all again. As someone with alopecia, that's not something that I believe in my soul, but it is what they believed, that was the thing that made them women, and in giving that up, they were doing something that was so drastic and important. So if you want to hear more about that, I will link that in the description box down below too. And in fact, in many versions of Rapunzel around the world, she is referred to as golden hair, or sometimes even golden locks too. And you can refer to my History of Rapunzel video if you would like to hear more about that. The fairy tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears has that rule of three, which I've spoken about before. The number 3 is very important when it comes to fairy tales, as is the number 7. The number 3 is mainly important for repetitive elements. Things will often happen a certain number of times, such as Hansel and Gretel being left in the woods twice before on the third time they are lost entirely. In this case, Goldilocks encounters 3 different things: porridge, chairs, and beds. And out of those things, there are 3 of each. And this is because, as I said, 3 is a really important number, but because it's a repetitive element, which means that when you are telling someone the story, you are more likely to remember it. Because, of course, fairy tales were told orally before they were written down by anyone at all. Something that I really, really love about this tale is that we now have something called the Goldilocks principle, which has come out of this fairy tale and is applied to so many different things. The Goldilocks principle in astrobiology is a planet that is not too cold and not too hot, but just right for life to exist. So, as Stephen Hawking said, Earth is a Goldilocks planet because, like Goldilocks, the development of intelligent life requires the planetary temperatures to be just right. I just really love that. I love that that exists. There's also something called the Goldilocks principle in marketing, where a company, capitalism, will make 3 different versions of a product and they will have different price points. A high one, a low one, and one in the middle. And this is in the hope that people will go for the middle value products over the cheaper ones, and then occasionally they'll get people who will buy the most expensive ones too. There's also something called the Goldilocks principle in the stock market, in economics too. The Goldilocks market is when stocks are increasing at a steady rate, but inflation is not going up. And this is something that you find between something called the bear market and the bull market, which is where the market is either increasing too much or going down in value too much. Like in the fairy tale, the Goldilocks version of the stock market is when things are just right. If we look at specific elements from the tale, there are, of course, other fairy tales that share similarities with regard to theme. So there are lots of fairy tales out there that include anthropomorphic bears. Penguin actually put together a book of classic fairy tales that have animal bride and bridegrooms, and I will insert the cover here so that you can see it. This was often a device that was used to warn people about arranged marriage, saying you don't know what you're going to get if you marry someone who you have never met before. And some versions of that fall into that is, of course, Beauty and the Beast, and there is a fairy tale called East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is very similar to the tale of Beauty and the Beast. Again, I've done a dissection of the history of Beauty and the Beast, which I'll link down below, but East of the Sun, West of the Moon is a Norwegian fairy tale which is about a prince or a king who has been changed into a bear, and he kidnaps a young girl and takes her away, and she realizes that his actual form is that of a prince, and she tries to get it back again. There is also a fairy tale from Thailand which is called The Brave Bear Killer, and I really hope that the ending of this tale was going to be different, because it's about a man and a wife who are out one day and they stumble across a bear, and the bear goes to attack them, and the husband runs away because he's really scared. He can't kill this bear, so his wife grabs a knife and she goes out and she slays the bear and kills it. So the husband thinks, well, I can't tell everyone that my wife killed the bear because that's really embarrassing. So he goes around telling everybody that he killed the bear. The king hears about this and sends his men to go and investigate to see if there actually is a dead bear that has been stabbed, and they find that to be true. So they call upon this man whenever they need something. So there's a huge cobra that's in the king's well, so they call this man, Han Mi, to come back and kill this cobra because he's so good at killing things, and the wife is really angry because she knows that she was the one who killed the bear. Han Mi goes and accidentally kills the cobra. He falls down the well and he's just trying to find something to grab onto, and he ends up grabbing the snake by the neck and strangling it by mistake. He then goes off to kill a crocodile which has been terrorizing a local village, and he allows the king's soldiers to kill the crocodile, and then he gets the glory and says that he did it himself. And I was really hoping that by the end he would get some comeuppance and the wife would get to lord over everything, as she was the one who had really been brave, but that is not what happens. But if I ever retold that fairy tale, it would definitely get a different ending. Going back to anthropomorphic bears for a second, there is a Native American fairy tale which is called The Man Who Married a Bear, and this is about a man who is called 5 times surrounded by war, and he goes out one day and he finds a woman by a river when he's going fishing, and she says, "Will you marry me?" which is a very bold thing for her to say. And he says, okay. So she takes him back to her cave, where she transforms back into a bear, because that is her true form. And she has all of these supplies which she has laid out for winter, and she goes to sleep and she asks him to keep guard. She wakes up during the winter because she can hear these hunters who are coming looking for her, and when she wakes up, blood starts pouring out of her mouth, and she says to her husband, "This is the blood of the hunters. I am going to kill them." So she puts on a red dress and she goes out as a woman, not in a bear form, and she kills these hunters who have come to kill her. And then she comes back into the cave and she goes back to sleep. But then more hunters come and she wakes up and there is more blood that is coming out of her mouth, and she turns to her husband and she says, "This blood is my own. I know it's my own, and I am going to die." And she goes out in the form of a bear, and the hunters this time do kill her. And once they've killed her, the man comes out of the cave and he goes home with these hunters and he tells them what he has experienced. In Honduras, there is a fairy tale called The Bear's Son, which is about a man and a woman who sell honey at a local market. And one day the man says, "I don't want to go to the market because I saw a bear on the path the other day." His wife says, "I'm not scared, I'll go on my own." So she goes, but she's intercepted by a bear who takes the honey and then steals her and drags her back to his house. They end up having a son together who's half bear and half man. The son grows up and kills his bear father, and they go back to the village where everyone exploits this person because he is half bear, half human, and they want him to do all of the work on the farm that they can't do themselves because he is so big and so strong. There are lots of other fairy tales out there about anthropomorphic bears. One of my favourites is one called Bearskin, which crops up in various different cultures and is about a young girl who has an overbearing father, and to escape him she's given this bearskin by a godmother of hers who's into witchcraft, and this bearskin allows her to become a bear and she can travel wherever she likes. And in some versions she then comes across a prince and is taken in by him almost like a pet, like in The Little Mermaid, and then he has a ball which she goes to, and she uses this magical power from her godmother to turn her skin into a dress. So in that way it's like Cinderella as well. So she goes to the ball and then turns back into a bear, in the same way that the bear man in East of the Sun, West of the Moon is able to do that too. It's a motif that crops up time and time again. But something that I wanted to end this on is one of my favourite fairy tales, and it's by Madame de Lannoy, and she was a really cool woman who told fairy tales in France in the 1600s. In fact, she was the person who coined the term fairy tale. She ran literary salons. She was rumoured to be a spy. She was just pretty awesome. So she told a fairy tale which was called Goldilocks. It's the story of Goldilocks, and I would love to think that her version of Goldilocks and Goldilocks and the Three Bears are somehow linked. Both have women in them who want things to be just right. They don't want to settle, they want to find the thing that's perfect for them, but I have a feeling that they're probably not actually linked. But let's talk about this fairy tale anyway, because of its namesake and just because it's really, really cool. So this is the tale of the beauty with golden hair, also known as Princess Goldilocks. Once there was a king who had heard about Princess Goldilocks, who lived in the kingdom next to his. She was very beautiful, she had golden hair, and he really wanted to marry her. Now you would think that a good thing to do would be to go and speak to Goldilocks and see if she wanted to marry him, but he didn't have time for such things, so instead he found out what dress size she was, and he had lots of beautiful clothes made up for her, and he sent all his soldiers to carry these gifts of clothes and food and loveliness to her kingdom and say, hey, you person that I have never met before, I really want to marry you. So the soldiers took all of these gifts to Goldilocks and said, our king would like your hand in marriage. And Goldilocks looked at them and said, no, I'm all right, thank you, I'm good. So they went home and they told him, I'm really sorry, Your Majesty, but she is not interested. Now the king's best friend heard this and said, if you'd sent me, she would not have said no to me. And there was a misunderstanding here, because what the best friend meant was, I love my best friend the king, and I would have been able to persuade Goldilocks that she should want to marry him. But what they heard was him saying, she wouldn't have been able to resist me, I want to marry her. And for that, the king locked him up in the tower and threw away the key, and he very nearly died until the king suddenly had a change of heart and thought, wait, he's my best mate. Maybe that's not what he meant. So he decided to rescue him, and half dead, the friend tumbled out of the tower and said, Your Majesty, what I meant was, I would love to go to Goldilocks and tell her how awesome you are and how much she should definitely want to marry you. So the king said, Oh, that makes sense. Sorry about that. Yes, please do go and tell Goldilocks how much I ardently love and admire her. So the best friend said, Cool, just give me a horse and a love letter and I'll be on my way. It was a long journey. The best friend set off on his horse, and on his way he saw a carp which had jumped out of the river when trying to get flies and was dying on the riverbank. So he picked up this golden carp and he threw it back into the river, and the carp said, Thanks so much, I really thought I was going to die. I owe you one. The best friend continued, and next he saw an eagle that was trying to eat a crow, and the best friend liked crows, so he took his arrow and he shot the eagle, and the crow was ever so grateful. He said, Whew, thank you, I really thought I was a goner. I owe you one. The best friend continued, and he came across an owl that was stuck in a net that had been put up by hunters. So the best friend took the owl out of the net and set him free, and the owl said, Whew, thanks. I really thought I wasn't going to make it. You know what? I owe you one. So the best friend got to the castle of Princess Goldilocks, and he told the princess all about his best mate the king and how great he was and how she should really take his hand in marriage. Goldilocks listened to what he had to say, and she said, You know, it sounds appealing, but I really promised that I wouldn't marry anyone until I found the ring that I was gifted when I was young, which I lost in the river a really long time ago, so I can't go with you. Sorry about it. The best friend thought about it, and he went to the river, and he called to the carp whose life he had saved, and he said, Carp, could you please find this ring for me? And the carp did. So the best friend took it and took it back to Goldilocks and said, Here's the ring. You have no excuse now. Come back and marry my best friend. And Goldilocks said, It's cool, thanks for the ring, that's great and all that, but actually there is another thing. There is a giant who lives one kingdom over, and he's in love with me, and he says if I ever marry anyone else, he'll kill me, and he'll kill my new husband, and I really don't want your best friend to be killed. So the best friend said, Okay, and he went to the kingdom to find this giant, and the giant really was so huge and so tall. The best friend didn't think he would be able to kill him on his own, but then out of nowhere, swooped down the crow whose life he had saved the other day, and the crow pecked out the eyes of the giant, who tumbled to the ground, and the best friend was able to hack off his head using his sword. He went back to Princess Goldilocks and said, I've given you your ring, and I've killed your jealous giant. Will you please now come and marry the king, who is my best friend? And Goldilocks said, Well, it's hard for me, because I'm really, really beautiful. And I really want to stay beautiful, especially for your king, because I think he would like that. So there's this thing, which is kind of like the elixir of life. And it's in a cave, really far down, a cave that is guarded by dragons. And it's said that if you're really beautiful and you splash this water on your face, this elixir, then it will make you even more beautiful and it will make you live forever. However, if you're ugly and you splash it on your face, it will make you even uglier and you will probably die. I can't go to the kingdom and marry the king unless I have a vial of this elixir, this beauty elixir, which will keep me looking fabulous and mean I will live forever. If you can get me some of that, yes, I will come and marry your friend. So the best friend said, Okay, I will do that. So he went off into the mountains and found the cave, which was guarded by dragons. And he thought, I don't know how I'm going to get into this cave that's guarded by dragons to get down to the bottom to find this well that contains an elixir of life to put in this vial that I have been given. And just when he thought all was lost and he was probably going to be swallowed whole, an owl arrived who he'd saved the other day. And the owl said, I know a secret entrance, which you can't fit through, but I can fit through. And I can fly down the cave and fill up this vial and bring it back to you, and you can take it to Goldilocks. So the best friend said, Well, that would be great. Thanks very much. So the owl did that, and the best friend had this vial of beauty elixir, and he took it to Goldilocks and he said, Look, I've given you your ring and I've killed the giant, and now I have brought you this vial of beauty elixir stuff that you said that you really need. And Goldilocks looked at it and said, well, I guess I'm out of excuses now, so I'm probably going to have to marry your best friend. But just so you know, because you've done all this stuff for me and you've been so great, I really do want to marry you instead. The best friend said, oh, that's sweet, but I really am here for the king. So Goldilocks said, okay, and she packed her bags and she came with the best friend to the kingdom of this king, and they agreed that they should be married. However, before they got married, the king started to get really cross because all Goldilocks would talk about was how fabulous his best mate was. And the king thought, well, this is not great, because if she loves my best friend, then she's never going to love me. I know what I should do. He had heard about this elixir that the best friend had brought for Goldilocks, and he knew what it did. He knew that if you were beautiful, it made you more beautiful, and then it made you live forever. And he thought, well, I think I'm handsome enough, and if I put some more of that on my face, maybe Goldilocks will love me instead of my best friend, and then we will live happily ever after. So he went into her bedroom and he took up this liquid and he went to splash it on his face. But what the king didn't know is that earlier that day, Goldilocks' maidservant had knocked the vial off her wardrobe by accident, and it had smashed and all the liquid had vanished. And the maidservant, not knowing what was in the bottle, thought, I'll just replace it with something else. So she went into the king's cupboard and she found this other bottle that looked exactly the same. But unfortunately for her and for the king, this bottle actually contained poison, and it was the poison that the king used against people he didn't like when he wanted to lock them up in towers. So when he splashed his face with this liquid that he thought was going to make him even more beautiful, all it did was kill him really slowly in agonizing pain, and he fell down on the floor and died. So that was really sad. But when Goldilocks found the king dead, she thought, well, you know, waste not, want not. Now I really can marry his best friend. And the best friend said, well, I guess my mate is dead. We can't be angry about this now. Yeah, let's get married. So Princess Goldilocks and the king's best friend married, and they lived happily ever after. So that is the story of Goldilocks, a separate Goldilocks, but one that I really love all the same. I will link all of the previous episodes of Fairy Tales with Jen that I have made in a playlist in the description box down below. I would love for you to go and check it out if you haven't watched them already. I've talked about the history of Beauty and the Beast, of Rapunzel, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, lots and lots of stuff. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to support this channel, I will link my Patreon in the description box down below. If you enjoyed this video, it would be lovely if you'd like to share it. And if you're not already subscribed, please do. It would be lovely to have you around. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll speak to you very soon. Sending lots of love. Bye.